Atheist Nomads episode 392. We still have legislative shenanigans.
The podcast you're about to listen to includes cursing and talking about hoo-haws. Please be advised.
Welcome to another episode of Atheist Nomads. I am Dustin, and joining me is Lauren.
Hello. Barely.
Hey, you weren't going to. It was just going to be me, and then at the last minute, you decided to join in. So you're definitely welcome, and your presence is appreciated.
Yay.
It has been interesting needing to recalibrate how I look at the news.
Yeah, we're coming off of, it's like we're changing seasons.
Yeah.
We're done with one season, and now we're starting back on a new season, but it's very similar to the previous seasons.
It's as if
the before times.
Yeah, and there's a whole lot of news that is highly repetitive with ongoing stories that are continuing to get very important coverage that we don't need to talk about on the podcast every week. Then there is other news that in the last 4 years wouldn't have had high enough death tolls or been so absolutely morally and politically abhorrent to be worthy of talking about. And now we're getting back to normal. And that has required me to kind of reset how I look at it. Because last night I looked at the stories I had lined up and was like, oh, there's 3. So I opened up my RSS reader and I found 10 in 20 minutes. I just needed to lower the bar.
Lower the bar, going from, let's see here, utterly ridiculous that resulted in the ending of people's lives.
Yeah.
Or some such. Or something so abhorrent that you have to talk about it. That stuff's
like
kind of
major human rights violations. Yeah. And
still going on, but not in the news per se.
And there's just less of it. Okay, the big thing that you know, with the change in the presidency and also the complete demoralizing of the far right-wing blowhards, that has taken care of 80% of what we've talked about for 4 years.
Yep.
So,
unfortunately, I'm pretty sure all 20% live in Idaho.
Oh, as we will see this week, no.
Oh, okay.
No.
Good.
Our first stories are from Idaho, of course.
Oh, okay. Start local.
Yep, we're going to start local with Governor Brad Little breaking with tradition.
He is like wholeheartedly traditionalist. So
if you want to talk about a good old boy traditional Republican, not the modern Tea Party Republican, not the far right religious right Republican, just a good old boy Idaho Republican in the most traditional sense of the term. He is kind of the embodiment of that, which is why we disagree with him a lot, but don't hate his guts.
Yeah. There's so many other people who are worth hating that he kind of slides under the radar for the most part.
Like he wants environmental protections to save the salmon. That's cool. He recognizes that women should have equal rights. He backed way down when we needed him to step up with the pandemic, but he at least didn't cave completely.
Yeah, he did.
If he had caved completely, he would have ended all restrictions, and he didn't do that.
True.
He
barely.
Yeah. But anyway, so he is breaking with tradition now, where his predecessor, Butch Otter, who was governor for 3 terms, a full 12 years, and Brad Little have both kept their mouths shut on anything the legislature is discussing, trying to stay as neutral and independent on that until it gets to their desk. Then you comment.
Okay. As, you know, it should be. The legislation shouldn't be affected by whether or not the governor is going to pass it. That's the whole point of having that balance.
Although you can also make arguments for the executive branch making private statements to leadership in the legislature to give them a heads up that you need to make these changes or I'm vetoing it. So they don't waste their effort.
That's true.
And I'm sure he does that, but not doing public statements, challenging the legislature while they're in the middle of debating things.
Debating and discussing, not even like, yeah.
So this all came down on Friday, where he gave a speech saying, quote, "We are in the final lap of the pandemic fight and the finish line is close. We are so close to returning normal. But all that success is threatened by the actions taking place in the legislature right now. He went on to he was literally complaining about them trying to strip him of emergency powers and declare the pandemic emergency over.
Oh, I can't believe. Of course, I mean, how many people in the legislature were actually seriously considering this versus how much of this is just like one or two people introducing? You know how sometimes the really weird stuff it's just too.
Well,
people?
It's the next story. It passed the state house.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's
well, half of it passed the state house.
That's dumb.
What they actually passed was just ending all restrictions on gathering size. They cut short of declaring the emergency over, probably because of his statements. Like, he wouldn't have said anything if it was just Heather Scott.
Yeah, okay.
He said something because there was enough that it could have passed.
Yeah.
And so he pointed out that if the legislature ends that declaration, the National Guard gets pulled out, which they're helping out at all the vaccine testing sites, as well as helping out with vaccine administration, and are going to be critical in expanding vaccination as we continue to open up the groups that are eligible to get it. It would also cut off all federal funding that the state is getting to help with things like vaccination and testing capacity and all of that. All of that goes away. Even if you think the restrictions are an abridgment of personal liberty, declaring the emergency over is stupid.
Because it's not. And it's about to get worse.
We've got the UK strain at least as close as Colorado. I'm sure by now it's closer, if not here. And we're going to see another spike. That will run rampant through the population before we get widespread vaccination done. And yeah, so he picked a really good time to speak up. And he had a lot of people who then spoke up, backing him up.
Yeah, and that was the clincher.
Major General Michael Garshuk, the head of the Idaho
Is he a
National
modern
Guard.
Major General?
He is the commandant of the Idaho National Guard, and
I bet he hates that joke.
I'm sure every Major General does.
Yes. Either that or they have the songs memorized.
Yeah. He talked about all the things that his troops are doing because of these emergency orders, and he said, quote, "In order for the National Guard to respond to domestic emergencies beyond 72 hours, a formal disaster declaration is required by law. Also, a critical factor to consider is cost. During the emergency, such as COVID-19 pandemic, an emergency declaration is necessary to receive state and federal disaster response funding, including paying the National Guard troops that are doing the work."
Yeah, they're not volunteer. I mean,
they get paid when they're working.
Yeah, they signed up for it, but that doesn't make them.
They volunteered to be in the National Guard. They don't work for free.
Yeah.
He also got the Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry issued a statement cautioning against eliminating the emergency declaration. Simplot, Idaho Power, and Micron also issued statements supporting Little and keeping the emergency declaration in place. Micron is a major tech manufacturer in memory and storage. If you have a crucial hard drive or RAM in your computer, that's Micron. And there's a decent chance that you downloaded the podcast from a server that was running Micron memory, since most of their products are enterprise gear.
Yeah.
Like, they're a pretty big deal. And Simplot, of course, everybody knows from potatoes, in particular their contract with McDonald's, supplying, what is it, all of their potatoes or some crazy number?
I'm sure at this point it's not all of them, but it's
yeah. A substantial amount. So these are these are the biggest companies here, and of course the hospitals would have been totally backing up Little on this one. Yeah, that turned the legislature around.
Good.
The bill,
and now they can go on and keep calling him Governor Hitler or whatever, but at least there's not doing no real damage being done.
The bill passed to lift all COVID-related limits on gatherings.
Nope, wait, there's the damage.
That did pass.
Idiots.
55 to 15.
Wow.
That is nearly or is party line.
Wow. Everybody here knows scientifically it's been proven that large gatherings turn into super spreader events. Why are they insisting on large gatherings now?
Especially since the state isn't restricting churches at all.
It's because spring and summer are coming up, and there are festivals and businesses who don't want a repeat of last year, and they're panicking.
Yeah.
They're telling their legislatures, you better lift gatherings, otherwise we won't be able to do this. And rather than say, well, we're going to have to wait another year, I think they just buckled. Like, I can kind of get it.
You also get
It's going to be up to individuals to do the right thing and not go out.
You also get people like Heather Scott, who, in her statement, she said that Idaho hasn't had enough deaths to make COVID-19 a pandemic.
Fuck her. She's such a cold-hearted bitch.
Yeah. Nobody knows what's going to happen in the state Senate.
I'm willing to bet party line again.
But they are trying to do this as a concurrent resolution, which skips the governor, but requires a two-thirds support in both houses.
Both houses? Or you
both the House and Senate.
And Senate. Yeah. And I can see them getting it, just for those reasons that I just mentioned. I was thinking, God, that's so stupid. And then out loud, I was just like, oh, wait, well, here are these reasons. I'm like, ah, damn it.
All the small town festivals.
Yep. Any kind of tourism.
Yep. This would be for
Despite the fact that those little towns don't want people there.
Yeah.
It's also their entire economy is based on having people there.
The Emmett Cherry Festival, the Weezer fiddle competition. And
even the little ones like the Dog Park Festival in Nampa.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just, yeah, there's enough out there, and there's enough people gnawing at the bit to get out and do stuff who feel that disconnect from the community that I can see them just saying F it and just going anyway.
Now, of course, we know from the coup attempt in the summer that about half of the Republicans in the Idaho state legislature don't believe the pandemic exists. They believe that COVID is a hoax.
Or it's not, or if it's just an extension of the flu, or that it's not as bad as all that, like Heather Scott was saying.
I think they've probably moved from it's a hoax to it's being blown out of proportion.
Yeah.
Which it's not.
And unfortunately, like the state government is doing exactly everything they need to do to solidify that idea.
Yeah.
We have a change in presidency. Therefore, let's reopen the cities and make it seem like it was all politically motivated.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
This was not an anti-Trump conspiracy.
And you look at it from the standpoint of we've had rural hospitals on diversion, unable to take patients.
Which I guess a lot of people missed that.
Yeah.
That was not in the news as much as... That should have been front page, bold letters.
Despite the press conferences trying to get that in the news, it didn't really make the news. There were articles talking about it, but they all end up focusing on what's about to happen in Boise, not what's already happening in Emmett and Haley and the smaller towns. Twin Falls was on diversion for a couple months. We almost got that in Boise and Nampa.
But we didn't.
Therefore,
there must not be a problem.
We didn't because they opened up more beds and... Because
they diverted resources from other places.
Yeah, and
so screw you if you have a heart attack.
And the mayor also actually put some teeth on the mask mandate. And that's brought down the infection rate because it works.
Yeah, not coincidentally.
No. Yeah. But for some in the Idaho state legislature, even doing a concurrent resolution to bypass the governor isn't enough. And Representative Chad Christensen called the governor's press conference a tantrum, saying, quote, "After Friday's tantrum from Governor Brad Little, I'm now committed to moving forward to impeaching him. I've entertained it before. Now I'm all in."
I'm going to guess he was perfectly fine with Brett Kavanaugh crying, though, during his... The show of emotion is such a barb with these people. And it's so funny because we can't have women in positions of leadership because they're so emotional. But any man speaks up in any tone of voice and all of a sudden he's throwing a tantrum. Or, I mean, emotion's not a bad thing. And two, that press conference was hardly a tantrum.
Right. It was a prepared speech.
That's not a tantrum. Come on, guys.
Now, I'm sure a Republican from Ammon, Idaho knows what a tantrum actually looks like.
He probably has, 8 children.
Yeah.
Salmon.
That's a eastern Idaho town next to Idaho Falls with a lot of Mormons.
Idaho Falls suburb.
Yeah, with a bunch of Mormons.
So many fucking Mormons. Literally fucking Mormons. They don't stop breeding.
Yeah. So this guy, his number one priority this week is to get a federal gun control nullification bill going.
Okay, dude.
Like, he's going full 1850 on this one.
Yeah. Wow. So not even just the automatic assault weapon ban, but like...
He wants to get a bill through the state legislature to preemptively nullify any federal firearms restrictions.
God, I hate these. These preemptive things, resolutions that people are doing are so asinine. Making up threats should not be your bread and butter.
Also, when you bring up something like nullification, that exact term that is historical from the 1850s, with southern states nullifying federal laws that restricted the rights of slave owners. Specifically, laws that restricted the rights of slave owners to collect their slaves from other states after they have escaped.
Oh, okay.
Nullification was deemed by the Supreme Court, even in the 1850s, to be not possible. And then we had a war about it.
Yeah.
And hundreds of thousands of people died.
Yeah. Now, this won't go that far. It will just be laughed at.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, we have real problems. Can we please address those? Before you preemptively pass laws to, I don't know, protect your gun rights or not allow the banning of single-use plastic bags. Fucking Idaho. So worried about our bag supply.
Oh, it's the guy that makes the plastic bags.
Nobody else knows that. Or cares.
Well, heck, we got
the fact that that passed.
We've got a bill now in the state legislature to make it illegal for any city or county in the state of Idaho to put any limits on rental applications or deposit amounts.
Right, because that's the only way landlords are supposedly able to make any money.
The only limit in the state of Idaho is in the city of Boise. This representative owns a property management company in Boise.
So he's screwed it either way.
He had to and did disclose his conflict of interest in presenting this bill because it would personally benefit him.
Yeah.
He's literally trying to use the state legislature to allow him to rip off poor people.
Yep.
For a positive, I guess, Melissa Wintrow, Democrat from Boise, has introduced Senate Bill 1030 in the Idaho State Senate to add the words sexual orientation and gender identity to the Idaho Human Rights Act. This is the 15th year in a row that this has been introduced, and it already has 16 co-sponsors.
The same 16 that's been co-sponsoring it for 15 years?
Probably, yeah. There is some hope. They have some optimism that this year will be different. Biden's already signed 2 executive orders related to sexual orientation and gender identity, both with allowing trans women to compete in women's sports and reversing the ban on transgender service members. So the hope is that with that, the incentives for the state to claim that they can shouldn't add those words. You kind of make those arguments null.
If it didn't happen in the Obama administration, it's not going to happen now.
Yeah. Well,
and until it's protected federally.
There's also 13 cities across the state, as well as Ada County, that have sexual orientation and gender identity protected at the local level.
Nice. So
we've had the Supreme Court case that ruled 6-3 that it's illegal to fire or discriminate against people in the workplace based on sexual orientation or gender identity. So there's a lot of good arguments that the change that it would make to add those is small, which increases the chances of it passing. Kylie's not feeling well, so Lauren's leaving us to take care of her. But yeah, with this change in the law, that Wintrow acknowledges that it is a statewide issue because there are LGBT people who live outside of the cities that have these protections. And also the fact that a state law has way more enforcement mechanisms. For a great example, when it's in state law, it has to be on those state employment posters in every company's break room, which includes the Idaho Human Rights Act. And getting those words added there will remind everybody that it is illegal for them to be discriminated against. And that's important. That is necessary. But the last line from this article is what makes me nervous. Quote, currently, Idaho's Republican-controlled legislature is looking for a compromise for this bill, concerned a straightforward change could infringe on religious freedoms. End quote. A straightforward change that's being asked for in this bill is to add 4 words to the Idaho Human Rights Act. They're wanting to these compromises they're asking for would either create a much lengthier addition to the Idaho Human Rights Act to specially carve out limited protections for sexual orientation and gender identity, or they'll keep it concise and add the words sexual orientation and gender identity unless it hurts somebody's religious feelings, which would make all human rights in the state of Idaho dependent on the religious beliefs of the person doing the discriminating. This feels like it's a poison pill they're trying to put into the bill to destroy it, and that fucking sucks. Okay, yes, we still have more news, but I played the bumper because I was actually taking a break so I could go check on Kylie too. She's in snuggling with Lauren now, and it's just sad. But, even though everybody's thinking about the pandemic, colds still go around, and with social distancing and everything, way less, they still go around. Moving away from Idaho, we've got one that's just plain silly. Oklahoma State Representative Justin Humphrey has introduced a bill in his state that would put a new species under the jurisdiction of the Oklahoma Wildlife Conservation Commission so that they could set a hunting season and sell specific hunting licenses and fees for this. We'll call it a species. Quote, a lot of people don't believe in Bigfoot, but a lot of people do. Now, in the article, it doesn't really sound like he's necessarily a true believer in Bigfoot. He pointed to tourism being one of the biggest attractions in his district, with a lot of that being people coming in for hunting, as well as the town's annual Bigfoot festival every October. So if they can get the hunting season for Bigfoot the same time as the festival, people will come for the festival, they'll buy hunting licenses, they'll stay longer, and they'll go out wandering around in the woods with guns looking for something that's not there. He's also hoping to get a $25,000 bounty for the first person to kill a Bigfoot. Now, I have a bunch of objections to this. The first of which is Oklahoma for Bigfoot? No. If any state's going to have a Bigfoot hunting season, it'd be Oregon, Washington, or California. Okay, it'd be Oregon. Oklahoma? We all know that if Bigfoot did exist, it would live in the mountains of the Northwest, in the Siskiyous, Cascades, and Canadian Rockies, not the plains. So there's that angle. There's the fact that he's wasting precious resources of the government and the legislative schedule to try to pass what is very, very, very literally a bullshit bill. There is real work for them to be doing, not talking about Bigfoot hunting season. And then there's also the angle of if you assume there are Bigfoot to hunt, you don't want to be setting up a hunting season for something you don't even know if it's in your state. For one, it would increase the chances that somebody walking around with a gun is going to shoot a random hairy person, mistaking it for him for a Bigfoot. And for two, that sets bad precedent for hunting creatures that, if found, should have major government protections and not be available for hunting. But again, it's Oklahoma. Even if there were Bigfoot, they wouldn't be there. Dr. Anthony Fauci has been speaking a little more plainly in interviews now that he's actually free to speak freely to the press without fear of repercussions. And he was asked about Trump's April suggestion about ingesting bleach to treat COVID. He said, quote, "I just said, oh my goodness gracious, I could just see what was going to happen. You're going to have people hear that from the president, and they're going to start doing dangerous and foolish things, which is the reason why immediately those of us who were not there said, this is something you should not do. Be very explicit." The CDC came out, I think, the next day and put it in one of their publications. Do not do this. Like, it's been interesting seeing the number of interviews he's done, looking at how much easier Dr. Fauci's life is now with a president who doesn't try to take the spotlight at a press conference and stand over his shoulder and judge and then take the microphone and start spouting off nonsense in the middle of a briefing about scientific matters. Yeah, he definitely prefers having a boss that lets him say what he needs to say and talk about science and stick to the science, and to not have to worry about the politics of it. Because Dr. Fauci is a scientist, and scientists tend to like the science free of politics. And we had a president who did not work well with that, and we now have a president who wants to let the scientists speak. And that's awesome. Tony Spell is the Baton Rouge pastor that we talked about quite a few months ago when he got arrested for defying COVID-19 capacity limits by fully opening his church and not requiring masks. Well, he's in court now, and the judge denied his motion to dismiss the charges against him. Spell said outside of the courthouse, quote, "You just ruled against God. Get ready for the judgment of God." Now, he said that outside of the courthouse because he couldn't get inside of the courthouse because he refused to put on a mask, and you can't enter that courthouse without wearing a mask. So the judge just spoke to his lawyer because the lawyer's client was too stubborn to do a very basic thing. Granted, if he wasn't too stubborn to wear a mask, he probably wouldn't have been too stubborn to do online services instead of having unlimited numbers of people in the church, and he never would have gotten in trouble in the first place. But he had dozens of his church members with him not wearing masks, holding American flags, and wearing t-shirts in support of free breathing. Yeah. He said, quote, "We will never comply, and we will always resist. We will always stand up for the Word of God and the First Amendment of the United States." Despite the fact that the COVID orders when they have addressed religion, have been bending over backwards, being overly generous to churches, not being extra restrictive on churches. It has never been a free exercise issue. It has been a public health and public safety issue. So he is continuing to hold his church services, and his next hearing is March 1st, and if he gets convicted, he will be going to jail. Honestly, he should be getting a count on all 6 of those charges for every single time he opens the door of his church to people. Rudy Giuliani pushed his baseless accusations that the election was stolen from Trump with a high degree of specificity, in fact, specific enough to get sued for $1.3 billion by Dominion Voting Systems for defamation. And defamation, of course, is when you put something in writing that is a fact statement about someone or a business that is demonstrably false and causes them demonstrable harm. The employees, leadership, and owners of Dominion Voting Systems have been facing death threats since the election because of claims that they stole the election. So they're suing. And of course, Giuliani appears to still have a radio show, Chat with the Mayor on WABC, could be TV, where he said, quote, "What do you think I am? Some kind of a jackass that's intended to frighten me? You want to frighten me? You want to scare me? Like you have some of these companies and stations that have gone ahead and kissed your you-know-what because they're afraid of you? Well, I tell you I'm a crazy guy. I really am. I'm just really crazy. So not only haven't you scared me, you've actually given me something that I couldn't get through the censorship that's been set up so nobody can see your machines. He thinks the lawsuit is just to shut him up. And yeah, the lawsuit is really mostly just to shut him up, but also to get him to apologize and do a retraction and get the death threats and assaults to stop. Yeah, Giuliani is crazy, and saying stuff like that really doesn't help his case. Missouri Senator Josh Hawley is the senator who, while walking into the Senate chambers for the election certification on January 6, pumped his fists in the air to the crowd of insurrectionists that were soon to storm the Capitol. In response to his actions, some of his colleagues filed ethics complaints against him for his role in trying to block the certification of Biden's victory of the presidential election. So his response to that has been to file a counter ethics complaint against his colleagues who filed the ethics complaint against him, claiming that his complaint has, quote, details your deliberate and partisan abuse of the process, including your apparent coordination with various dark money groups and requests that you be appropriately disciplined, end quote. They're linking him to his connections with a armed insurrection, an attempt to overthrow the United States Congress and murder the vice president, the speaker of the House, and anybody else they could get their hands on. That's what the charges against him are for. And he's trying to turn this around on his colleagues that, oh no, they're just in on some dark money thing. Yeah, I know Hawley's hero is famous for his bullshit countersuits against anybody who sued him. But Josh Hawley these are going to be heard by the Senate Ethics Committee. And it's not a case of, like with Trump's counter lawsuits to anybody who sued him for anything, where he could throw more money at lawyers to make it too expensive to sue him. This isn't going to work. He should be trying to just respond to the charges against him, but he can't. So he's going to make up something for his opponents, which will probably be used against him in the ethics investigation and any discipline that he gets. Goya Foods is a food company that is best known for producing products for the Latinx community, and their board has revoked their CEO, Robert Unan's media privileges, including his access to the company's social media accounts. Why? Well, ever since his July 2020 appearance at the White House with Donald Trump, where he said that America was truly blessed to have his leadership, which outraged the many people in the Latinx community who are almost all of Goya Foods customers, Unane hasn't slowed down and has been using his every chance he can get to talk to the media and repeat bogus claims about election fraud. And so the company is trying to make sure that if he makes any more appearances on TV, that he does not speak for the company. If he ignores that, they could fire him. And this is actually just a case of a company trying to stay apolitical, which is a reasonable thing for companies to do. But when your CEO keeps getting political, what are you going to do? And even this week, Fox News still isn't done with supporting the QAnon conspiracy. Tucker Carlson, from last month's War on Christmas special, is still defending QAnon. His main complaint is that
the real threat is a forbidden idea. It's something called QAnon. We're watching a profound change taking place in American society, and it's happening very fast. The stakes could not be higher, but no democratic government can ever tell you what to think. Your mind belongs to you. It is yours and yours alone. Once politicians attempt to control what you believe, they are no longer politicians. They are, by definition, dictators.
That is some Class A bullshit there. I haven't seen the government trying to silence QAnon. Corporations are. We have news media that are trying to counter QAnon and address the lies of QAnon. And we have Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and the like shutting down QAnon accounts, but none of those are the government. Private companies are free to moderate their businesses, their platforms, choose who they allow to use their servers. And when those companies are complicit in the spread of this conspiracy by the way their algorithms actively spread it, they have a moral obligation to undo some of the damage. QAnon is everywhere because of YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, where the algorithm spread it, because rage gets people to keep watching, to keep scrolling, to keep looking, to comment, and to stay on that site or app so they can see more ads. QAnon was good for business. It's not now, so they've turned against it. The problem isn't any government overreach. The problem is corporations finally trying to do the right thing, because it's no longer convenient for them to continue to ignore the spread of dangerous, dangerous conspiracies. At the St. Pius X convent hostel in Kadamayam in southern India, on March 27, 1992, a young nun who was a student at that convent, staying at that convent, got up in the morning and went down to the kitchen to get some water, where she found the priest, who was one of the psychology professors at the school that this nun was attending, having sex with the nun who was supervising that particular convent hostel. Nails were driven into this young woman's neck. There was an axe used to hack at her, and then her body was thrown in a well. The lacerations from the axe were on her head. She had a fracture on her skull. And yet, between that and the way her slippers were strewn about, and the way her slippers were in a not any way that would make any sense for her to be putting them there in the kitchen, and the way the kitchen was in disarray, and the bloody axe, all led the local authorities to determine it was a suicide by drowning. Her brother had gotten the post-mortem report and knew you don't get a fractured skull, lacerations to your head, and nail marks on your neck and a drowning. He knew she was murdered, and they dumped the body. Her brother and father both were working on this. They got the CBI, the Indian version of the FBI, to take up the case, and they did so in 1993. And they didn't charge anybody for 12 years. In that time span, they filed 4 reports on the case. 3 of them were petitions to get the judge to drop the case. The first one agreed with the local police that it was suicide by drowning, and the judge rejected that, so they had to reopen the case. The second time, they said that it was inconclusive. They couldn't determine if it was suicide or homicide, so they asked that the case be closed. That was rejected. The third time, by this time we're to 1999, they said it was a homicide, but they couldn't find any suspects to charge. The judge's response to that was unsatisfactory. Finally, in 2005, they filed another report saying the case was untraced. They still couldn't identify any suspects, and it was again rejected by the judge. So it was then transferred from the New Delhi branch to a branch of the CBI, more local, and it took them only 4 years to charge Father Couture and Sister Sefi, the priest and nun who were having sex in the kitchen when the deceased walked in on them, as well as Father Jose Putricayo, who police say was involved in the killing. They all denied the charges, also denied that they'd had any improper relationship. It wasn't until 2019 that the trial actually started. They found evidence that Sister Sefi had got a hymenoplasty to try to reconstruct her hymen the day before she was arrested in 2008 to make it look like she was still a virgin, thus discrediting that there was anything there. Prosecutors accused the local police there of tampering with evidence and destroying documents. India has a rather small but sizable Christian minority, and that particular town has a very large Christian minority, and the police are very friendly to religion of any kind and deferential to religious leaders. So it's very reasonable that in that town, the priest could use his control of the diocese money and material, as well as the obedience of other priests, nuns, and laymen for the cover-up. Prosecutors said that the superintendent and deputy superintendent of the police department local there were involved in the cover-up, and they finally got a conviction. It took almost 30 years for them to get a conviction on a murder that should have been very quick to solve. But because of an active cover-up, we know the Catholic Church regularly moves priests from diocese to diocese to keep them away from getting criminal charges for raping children. Apparently, they'll do that for priests that are murdering nuns, too. And we know, like from the Australian commission looking into priest sex abuse, that the police have been complicit in covering up these crimes. And that's been happening in India as well. 30 years. This article, you can find it in the show notes. It is a fascinating read. And in the UK, the Jewish community there will have used January 27, Holocaust Memorial Day, to bring more attention to the persecution of Uyghur Muslims that are facing what the U.S. State Department under Mike Pompeo on his last day called a genocide, and that the Biden administration is likely to continue using that designation. The re-education camps, the forced sterilization, the disappearances. Yeah, it's a genocide going on, tied in with mass relocation of Mandarin Chinese people into the region to dilute the proportion of the population that the Uyghur Muslims are, and to dilute the culture to make it more homogenous with Han Chinese culture. It is pretty disgusting, and it's nice to see a people group who have not too distant experience with genocide using their Memorial Day for the genocide their community faced to bring more light to a genocide that another community is facing. And we don't have any feedback, and we don't have any new supporters. If you want to contact us, you can use the SpeakPipe button on the website, or go to atheistnomads.com/speakpipe, or you can use the contact form on the website, or you can send us an email at contact@atheistnomads.com. That will be changing soon to feedback@atheistnomads.com. You can use both at this point. And I'll be changing that because of the amount of spam we're getting at contact, because I have been publishing it in the show notes, and it is easy to scrape by Indian companies trying to sell SEO and website development. And I get so many of those emails. So very soon, it'll be a few months. But yeah, we're going to get rid of the contact@atheistnomads.com email. Feedback will be the new one. You can always use the contact form. I will start soon deleting all the links before I finally reach the point where I will start directing that email address straight to trash. So start using feedback, or just use the contact form. If you want to support the show, you can find out how at atheistnomads.com/donate, or just go to patreon.com/atheistnomads to become a patron of the show. And if you want to just leave us a one-time donation, you can do so at paypal.me/atheistnomads. And until next week, remember, not all those who wander are lost.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Atheist Nomads. You can find show notes and contact information at atheistnomads.com. Follow us on Twitter at Atheist Nomads, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Atheist Nomads. Please subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcatcher of choice, and while you're there, feel free to leave us a review. Theme music is courtesy of Sturdy Fred. Until next time, this has been the Atheist Nomads.